Children, in today's video lesson, I shall be completing the explanation of the story The Happy Prince by Oscar Wilde. Now, we had read that while flying over the city, the swallow it located two boys who had taken shelter under the archway. But then they were hauled by the watchman, and they had no choice but to wander in the rain. It was very cold and the two boys were shivering. They were even very hungry. Now, this matter was reported to the statue of the prince by the swallow after he flew back to the prince. Now, let's read what happens next. Then he flew back and told the prince what he had seen. "I'm covered with fine gold," said the prince. "You must take it off, leaf by leaf, and give it to the poor. The living always think that gold can make them happy." Now, children, people have a notion, human beings, in fact, have a notion, they have a belief that if we have gold, we can be happy. They have this wrong notion that money can bring happiness in our life. But then for the poor and for the needy children, it is much required. Money is required to make their both ends meet. Once they are able to fill their belly, they will be able to concentrate on the other aspects of life. So for the time being, it was very much required that food was made available for the two boys who were shivering and wandering in the rain. So what did the prince say? That why don't you pluck a leaf of gold from my body, because my body is covered with fine gold, and you just pluck one of the leaves and you go and give it to the poor boys. This would make them happy. Leaf after leaf of fine gold the swallow picked off till the happy prince looked quite dull and grey. So of course it was a statue made up of lead, which was very dull, very grey. It was grey in color. Again, dull and grey symbolizes, children, that the prince, though the name of the statue was the Happy Prince, but it was quite contrary to its name. It was very dull and now it appeared to be grey, which symbolize the opposite of happiness. So leaf by leaf, the bird plucked from the body of the prince and he distributed it to the poor and the needy. Now let's read next what happens. The fine gold he brought to the poor, and the children's faces grew rosier, and they laughed and played in the street. "We have bread now," they cried. So the children, after receiving the gold, their faces, it lit up, children. It grew rosier, it grew red, red because of the happiness that was reflecting on their face. So they were happy and they played in the street. And what did they exclaim? That we finally have bread. Then the snow came, and after the snow came the frost. So, children, that snow followed by frost. You know what is snow, you know what frost is. You must have read about it. So, the place, it became very, very cold. The land was covered with snow and frost. The streets looked as if they were made of silver. Why? Because frost appears to be silver in color. You must have seen, children, when you open the refrigerator, sometimes drops of water, when they convert into ice, and it is very elongated in shape, right? That is like frost. So it is silverish in color. So the streets, they were made of silver. Everybody went about in furs, and the little boys wore scarlet caps and skated on the ice. Now, ice over here, it was again silver and very dull in its appearance, white snow all over. The little boys, they were covered in furs. In furs means what? Fur clothing, right? And they were also wearing scarlet caps. Scarlet, I have told you, red colored caps. The poor little swallow grew colder and colder. On the other hand, the conditions were not good for the swallow. It grew colder and colder. Also, children, there wasn't any food available. But he would not leave the prince. He loved him too well. He loved the prince, children. And why did the bird love the prince? Only because the prince had a heart of gold. It was not only the body, but here his heart was also made of gold. And when I say his heart was made of gold, I don't mean the metal gold, but yes, he was very kind, he was very considerate, and he was very thoughtful towards the weak and the vulnerable. He picked up crumbs outside the baker's door when the baker was not looking and tried to keep himself warm by flapping his wings. So, by engaging himself in a little exercise of flapping of his wings, he tried to keep himself warm. And from where did he gather food? From outside the baker's door. The breadcrumbs which were thrown away by the baker outside, maybe for the dogs, the bird picked them up. So this is how he was making his both ends meet. But then the conditions were not apt for its survival. Let's read what happens next. Now, because it was very cold and the survival of the bird was becoming difficult, there was no food available. The bird knew that his death was approaching. So what happens? Let's read. But at last he knew that he was going to die. He had just enough strength to fly up to the prince's shoulder once more. Goodbye, dear prince, he murmured. Will you let me kiss your hand? Now, this goodbye was a different kind of a goodbye, children. He was not flying away to Egypt this time, but then he was flying away to heaven. The soul would now rise towards the heaven. So this was a final goodbye from the bird to the statue of the prince. And what did he demand? That let me kiss your hand. I'm glad that you are going to Egypt at last, little swallow, said the prince. You have stayed too long here, but you must kiss me on the lips, for I love you. The prince, he did not know what the bird was intending to say. He was not flying away to Egypt, but the prince did not realize it, and it was too late. The prince said that you must not kiss me on my hands, rather on my lips, because I love you dearly. You are my dear friend. You have been by my side. It is not to Egypt that I am going, said the swallow. I am going to the house of death. Death is the brother of sleep, is he not? Finally, the bird confessed that it's not to Egypt that I am flying, but I am flying away to the house of death. It's a sleep that I shall slip into forever, and I shall never rise again. And he kissed the happy prince on the lips and fell down dead at his feet. And with these words, he kissed the prince and he fell down dead. That moment, a curious crack sounded inside the statue, as if something had broken. Please underline, children. So at that moment, the moment the bird fell down dead, children, at that very moment, there was a strange cracking sound inside the statue, as if something had broken. The fact is that the leaden heart had snapped in two. Even the leaden heart of the king, children, that had broken into two pieces. So there was a cracking sound. It certainly was a dreadfully hard frost. So it was hard as frost. Dreadfully hard means very, very hard. Early the next morning, the mayor was walking in the square below in company with the town councillors. Now, what had happened, children? that the next morning, the following morning, the mayor of the town, he was walking in the square below in company with the town councillors, with his ministers, he was with his councillors, people who consult the mayor, the head. So he was walking along with his councillors. As they passed the column means that tall erection of the statue, he looked up at the statue. Dear me, how shabby the Happy Prince looks, he said. Now, because the body was no more covered with gold and even the eyes were not there, the appearance of the statue, it was not attracting the onlookers anymore. It looked utterly shabby, dismal. So, what did the mayor order? The ruby has fallen. How shabby indeed. Shabby indeed means, yes, it's not looking very attractive. It's very shabby, not looking attractive at all, cried the town councillors, who always agreed with the mayor, and they went up to look at it. Children, please underline, this is an example of satire, and what satire is, I shall explain to you. Who always agreed, they always agreed what the mayor said. They didn't use their own perspective or their own mind. The ruby has fallen out of the sword, his eyes are gone, and he is golden no longer, said the mayor. In fact, he is little better than a beggar. So he said that he is not at all attractive. He is little better than a beggar. So he resembles a beggar now. In fact, only a little better than a beggar. Again, the town councillors repeated what the mayor had said. Yes, little better than a beggar. And here is actually a dead bird at his feet, continued the mayor. We must really issue a proclamation that birds are not allowed. Okay, so what did the mayor further add to his statement? That there is also a dead bird at his feet. We have to issue a proclamation means we have to issue a declaration, we have to declare something, announce something, and let the general public know of what I have decided. Now, what was that proclamation? Let's read in the next on the next slide, children. It was a very strange proclamation by the king. And what was it? That birds should not be allowed to die here. And the town clerk, he too thoughtlessly made a note of the suggestion. So this shows, children, that the clerk too was a blind follower of the mayor. So they pulled down the statue of the Happy Prince as he is no longer beautiful and he is no longer useful. Now see, this is again an example of satire, children, that things which are no longer useful, no longer attractive to the onlookers and does not solve the purpose of the present times, it's not no longer required. So the statue of the Happy Prince, it was pulled down, said the art professor at the university. And even the professor was, being a professor, he was advocating what the mayor had ordered. They then melted the statue in a furnace. What a strange thing, said the overseer of the workmen at the foundry. Now, where his at the furnace, where the statue was being melted, those workmen who were watching over this when the melting of the statue was being done at the furnace commented that this is something very strange. This broken lead heart will not melt in the furnace. They said that, see, this heart, this heart which is made up of lead, it's just not melting. We must throw it away. So they threw it on a dust heap where the dead swallow was also lying. So finally, the heart, the leaden heart of the prince, it found a place with the dead bird. Bring me two most precious things in the city, said God to one of his angels. Now, this is an element, the supernatural element also, children, here, because fairy tales, they have those elements of supernatural. So, here, this, which is written in inverted commas, God spoke to one of its messengers, to one of its angels, that please bring me two most precious things in the city. And the angel brought him the leaden heart and the dead bird. You have certainly chosen, said God, for in my garden of paradise this little bird shall sing forever more, and in my city of gold the happy prince shall praise me. So, what did God say? That yes, you have rightly chosen the two most precious things. They will find a place in my garden, that is the garden of paradise, forever. The bird shall sing in my garden forever, and this golden king, whose heart is made of lead though, but actually, if we weigh it, it is a heart of gold. He shall praise me. He shall spread my words. He shall spread my words of being kind, being considerate, being compassionate. And where would he spread these words? For the welfare of humanity. So, a very meaningful chapter, children, and the last paragraph, the second last paragraph, and the last paragraph, children, it contains the moral. I shall be explaining the metaphorical and the literary devices used in the chapter, the symbolism used in the chapter, but listen to the explanation once again. I would recommend you, and then attempt the questions. Whatever I have explained and whatever points I have dictated, you should write them down and then use it while writing your answers. Thank you, children.